Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. Thank you all so much for taking a portion of your evening to hang out with us and talk tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about corporate accountability and corporate crime, which is a big topic for Public Citizen. You could say a lot of our work sort of revolves around that very topic. But before we actually get started, we'll do introductions. My name is Kelly No. I'm the online organizer for Public Citizen's Congress Watch Division. And I'm joined tonight by Christine Hines, who is our Consumer and Civil Justice Counsel. Say hello,
hey, everyone.
Christine. Hello, Christine. And I'm also joined by Amit Narang, who is our regulatory policy advocate.
Hi, everyone.
Great. So before we get started, we'll just let everyone know how this conversation will work and how you can talk to us. So you can use the comment feed that's showing up right below the video feed that you're looking at to ask us questions or to respond to our questions or just comment generally on what we're talking about. Just note that if you do comment there, you're going to have to refresh your page in order to be able to see new comments show up on that feed. And then also throughout the night, we'll probably be referring to a PowerPoint presentation. There's a link to that on the right-hand side of your page. It should say May 8th presentation or something like that. And so if you find that you're having trouble seeing the text on the screen, if it's too small, what have you, you can look at that PowerPoint, and you should be able to follow along that way. So tonight's presentation is about corporate crime and corporate accountability. So I'll just throw that up on the screen there. Corporate accountability is really a huge part of what we do at Public Citizen, and really you could say that all of our work falls under this umbrella of corporate accountability. But what does that really mean? What can we as consumers do to hold a legal entity like a corporation accountable when it or the people who work at it rather do something wrong? And this is kind of a far-reaching question. It extends to companies, that make the products that we buy every day, to companies that make cars, to the banks on Wall Street. This is really a far-reaching question that we're going to try and tackle tonight. So we've tried to frame it up this way. How can we've put two questions out there for how we can sort of frame up the idea of corporate accountability. First question being, how can we save lives by stopping corporations from hiding information about dangerous products? And how can we hold corporate executives accountable for hiding life-saving information? So those are the two questions we want to try and get at tonight. And the reason that we picked this topic for tonight's presentation, some of you may have noticed General Motors has been in the news recently for doing exactly what prompted us to pick these two questions, that is suppressing important public safety information about its cars. So we'll move on here. General Motors. So defects in General Motors cars have recently been implicated in the deaths of 13 people, maybe more, and GM is in the midst of recalling more than 2.6 million cars right now that have faulty ignitions. The cars essentially sort of stop running at random, and in some cases they disable important safety features like airbags. So GM has said that it has actually known about these defects in their cars as early as 2001. And there are actually, Reuters obtained emails between GM engineers that showed that the engineers had debated fixing the faulty ignitions as early as 2005. But then they determined that it would cost less than $1 per car to fix the ignitions, and so they decided to do nothing. The real kicker here is that GM has actually settled lawsuits about the about the defective ignitions as early as 2005, but required the details of those settlements to remain sealed rather than making what is clearly important public safety information known. And had those cases not been sealed, GM could have begun this recall, over a decade ago, instead of letting 2.6 million people drive around with a potentially life-threatening defect in their car. Not to pick on GM, but this example is really what we're trying to get at here at Public Citizen, which is how do we keep companies from keeping information like this, out of the public eye? How do we stop them from doing that? And if they do that, how do we hold them responsible? So to talk about those two things, we've got Christine and Amit, and so I'll throw it over to Christine first to talk about one of our proposed solutions, the Sunshine and Litigation Act.
Yep, thank you, Kelly.
No problem.
So what is the problem with court secrecy? So there are numerous cases where court approves secrecy, like sealed documents and secret settlements in the form of protective orders and other forms of secret court documents. that has kept the public in the dark about serious public health and safety dangers. The GM case is a really good example of that. The information about GM's defective ignition switches and airbag failures, as well as injuries and deaths associated with the product that went as far back as 2005, were hidden in confidential settlements. As a result of secrecy orders, it took the public and regulators in NHTSA much longer than it should have to discover dangers to health and safety. Secrecy orders have been used to prevent public exposure of public health and safety harms, including in cases involving breast implants, birth control devices, IUD birth control devices, asbestos, automobile defects like GM, heart valves, tires, prescription and over-the-counter medicines, children's products like cribs, cars, toys, motorcycle helmets, you name it. So what happens in a typical product liability case? Typically, an individual sues a manufacturer for an injury or death that has resulted from a defect in one of the manufacturer's products. In many cases, the victim faces a large corporation that can spend a large sum of money defending the lawsuit and delaying the case. Sometimes the victims are discouraged from continuing and often seek to settle the case. In exchange for compensation for the injuries, the victim is often forced to agree to a provision that prohibits him or her from revealing information disclosed during the case. If the case involves a health and safety issue, the corporate defendant is able to keep the damaging information from being publicized. Meanwhile, the public remains unaware of critical health and safety information that could potentially save lives. Critical safety information can be included in smoking gun documents, uncovered during the case during a procedure called discovery, where the victim or the plaintiff and the defendant exchange information. But if that information is kept confidential and the secrecy is approved by a court, it takes the public and regulators much longer than it should to discover the dangers to health and safety. Let me see if I can go back to our document here.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, Christine. Did you want to be sharing a screen with us right now, or are you just talking?
Yes. So I wanted to go to just to describe what's happening with the background before I got into Representative Nadler's bill.
Gotcha.
So here's another example of besides GM, another example of a secret settlement. In 2005, the drug company Eli Lilly settled 8,000 cases related to Zyprexa, which is a drug used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The cases allege that Eli Lilly did not disclose known harmful side effects of Zyprexa, such as inordinate weight gain and dangerously high blood sugar levels that sometimes resulted in diabetes. All of the settlements required the plaintiffs, the victims, to agree not to communicate, publish any statement concerning the events or circumstances around their claims, the alleged claims. The public did not learn about these settlements or of Zyprexa's dangerous side effects until nearly 2 years later, when the New York Times received and published leaked documents from a case that were subject to a protective order. So there's really a need for this bill that Representative Nadler has introduced, and we understand that the Senate side is also thinking about a bill that would address secret settlements. So what would the Sunshine and Litigation Act do? So if a judge receives a request from a corporate defendant for a protective order to keep things secret, or an order to seal court records, or a settlement agreement, this bill would require the judges to consider whether the public health and safety are at risk. First, the bill does not affect most court cases, because most court cases don't involve public health and safety. But it would require that the judge just consider whether the public health and safety are at risk. And the bill will ensure that the court-endorsed confidentiality does not jeopardize the public's ability to learn about potential health or safety dangers. So in the matter of GM, where clearly the public health and safety was at risk, and GM was a participant in all of those secret settlements with its victims, then this bill, if it were law, it would have prevented that, and we would have known about the defects much earlier. So we really like this bill. We are very thankful to Representative Nadler for introducing it. It would, we would learn about these risks ahead of time, and these companies would be held accountable before the situation gets really bad. We would address the issue earlier.
Good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I think that sort of covers what we were talking about in the first part of our question, which is, how can we stop corporations from suppressing this life-saving information before they do? And now we'll sort of move on to the second part of our question, which is, if they are found to be doing this, how do we hold real people accountable when a corporation is caught doing something wrong? And for that, I will turn it over to Amit.
Great. Thanks, Kelly, and thanks to all the members that are joining us tonight. That is an important question. How do we hold corporations, but more specifically corporate executives, accountable when they're endangering the public health and safety, as GM did, and as many other instances have shown corporations to be doing on a regular basis? One of the ways to hold them accountable is a piece of legislation that Public Citizen has been working on in conjunction with a Senate office and will be introduced shortly. It's a really exciting piece of legislation for us. We're very excited to unveil it. Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to share all of the details. I'm sure those here at the webinar are probably curious to know as many details as possible. I won't be able to share all the details, but I do want to whet your appetite here for a piece of legislation that should be coming soon, I would say within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So let me just start out by saying that I don't think this group needs that much convincing in terms of the failure of monetary civil penalties, which is a fancy way of saying fines. The failure of fines in terms of holding corporate executives accountable and deterring bad corporate behavior that recklessly endangers the public health and safety going forward. We've seen lots of fines on Wall Street and leveled at big Fortune 500 companies for some really egregious behavior, and frankly, it's not serving as a legitimate deterrent, and it's not holding corporate officers accountable, and is not turning them into responsible corporate officers. So the solution here is not more fines. The solution here is real tough criminal penalties, and that's the legislation that Public Citizen is currently working on and looking forward to introducing very soon here. Let me dive right in terms of the details here on this legislation. So this is responsive to the GM scandal, but is a piece of legislation that is going to apply more broadly than the GM scandal, and is going to ensure that corporate officers, when they know of safety hazards and safety defects, I should say, in the products that they're selling to consumers, or in their workplaces where their employees work, workplace safety hazards, that those corporate executives have a duty to report those safety defects or unsafe workplaces to the appropriate federal authorities. Those are the federal agencies that oversee those companies. Right now, that is not a duty or responsibility that corporate executives must adhere to. If it was something that corporate executives had a duty to do, we could have avoided so many of the deaths that occurred due to the unsafe ignition systems that GM was aware of and covered in 2005. So this legislation is designed to do a couple of very simple things. Essentially, when a corporate officer, a responsible corporate officer, and there would be certain designated high-level corporate executives that are designated as responsible corporate officers, when they become aware of safety defects with respect to their products or with respect to their workplaces, they are required to report those defects to appropriate federal authorities within a number of hours, a number of days, I should say, in verbally inform them within 72 hours, and then inform those authorities also in writing within a number of days thereafter, after learning of the risk to the public. It would also require those officers to inform members of the public that would be in danger because of the known defect, and if it's an unsafe workplace condition, inform those employees that could potentially be affected and harmed by the unsafe workplace condition. You know, it's shocking to say, but this is not something that currently exists. There's no duty among corporate executives to report knowledge of risks to the public that they're fully aware of. And clearly their preference is to hide this kind of information when they discover it. The bill that Christine just talked about is very good evidence that if it's up to them, corporate executives will try to hide the defects, and if there's any litigation around safety hazards, safety risks, they will try to keep it as secret as possible. So we're really excited that this legislation is going to be introduced, by a very prominent senator here in the next couple of weeks, and we are just as excited as to present it to our members. And of course, I think all our members know that taking on corporate America on issues like this, where they are going to fight tooth and nail against us, really requires our members to take a leading and active role in the fight to get this legislation enacted. Everybody knows it's not easy to get anything enacted in Congress, so we're going to need your help to push this legislation. I'm excited to unveil the official details here soon to all of you.
Great, thanks, Amit. So we're going to stop for 1 second and just answer a couple of questions. One I see on the comment thread about whether or not we're talking about two different pieces of legislation right now. So the first piece, HR 4361 that Christine talked about, which is the Sunshine and Litigation Act. And the piece of legislation that Amit is talking about has not yet been introduced, but will be introduced in the next couple of weeks. And as soon as we do have it, we'll let you guys know. We'll go out to you right away with an email so that you can work on that as well. And here's a question, I think, for Amit. The question is, how would this policy, the policy that you're talking about, Amit, have made a difference with GM?
Great question, and it definitely would have made a difference. So if we were to imagine a world in which this legislation would have been law at the time in 2005 when GM was uncovering the safety defects and trying to hide them, those corporate officers would know that there are criminal penalties, jail time. We're talking about jail time here, not just monetary fines, but jail time. That if it was ever discovered that they were intentionally trying to hide and not report those safety defects as they're required to under this legislation to federal authorities, they would be risking jail time. And I think that that would have changed the calculation at GM when it came to trying to hide the defects as a type of business decision on their behalf, where they thought that hiding it would cost them less, frankly, than revealing it and paying for whatever they would have to pay for in terms of a recall and fixing their cars. So this would have made probably the most crucial difference in changing the behavior at GM and incentivizing them to actually report these safety defects rather than bury them under the rug somewhere.
Great. Yeah, I'm certainly more frightened by jail time than a fine. It's my own personal take on that. So I think we've got another question here for Christine. Someone would like to know on these secret settlements what about general privacy issues, like a victim's privacy, and what about sort of like corporate trade secrets with these secret litigation sealed?
Sure. Okay. Well, let's remember the first thing. The first thing is that we must remember that the court system is public. The First Amendment creates a right of access to our court documents. So on the most basic level, the court system is public, and we have this First Amendment right to access to the court documents. But that said, this bill, the Sunshine and Litigation Act, does not affect most court cases which have nothing to do with public health and safety. So most cases don't have anything to do with public health and safety. But for those that do, the judges would have to consider that issue. So second, the bill does not prohibit confidentiality. It's asking the court to weigh the interest, the public's interest in knowing about health and safety hazards. So under the bill, where there is a need for privacy, it must be balanced against the public's substantial interest in discovering health and safety hazards. And in those very rare cases where a so-called trade secret seriously threatens public health and safety, that information should be made public. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that was a good one. It's definitely an important distinction to make. Great. All right, so we're going to move on, and we'll take some more questions here at the end. So I want to talk about tonight's advocacy question, or advocacy ask. So here's how you guys can take action. Let's see here. I am sharing my screen. Hooray! So right now, while GM is really front and center in the minds of our lawmakers, it's really the best time to ask them to support these bills. And so one way to secure a really firm commitment from your member of Congress is to ask him or her to be a co-sponsor of the legislation. And of course, one of the most effective ways to do that is to call their office and talk to a member of their staff. So tonight we're asking each of you to commit to calling your representative and asking him or her to co-sponsor H.R. 4361, the Sunshine and Litigation Act. And as soon as the other bill is introduced, we will send you an email and let you know, and then you can also call your representative and ask them to support that bill as well. So quickly, I just want to run through some sort of tips and tricks for calling your member of Congress. This obviously applies to any kind of call you make to your member of Congress, not just to these calls. So when you start a call to your member of Congress, always tell the person that you're a constituent. And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and tell them maybe what city you live in or your address, just so that they know that you really are a constituent. And the other thing, the second thing here, it's important to not be nervous. I think a lot of people get hung up on this, and they think that whoever they answers the phone is going to be combative or not going to want to listen to you. They're not experts, the people that answer the phones, and they're not going to be combative. Their job is to sort of take notes and pass that information along to the right member of staff. So certainly don't worry that you're going to get into some sort of nitty-gritty policy battle with whoever answers the phone. And definitely don't worry if your representative is not someone who typically agrees with you. At least, particularly on this issue, corporate accountability is sort of a cross-cutting topic. I think Republicans and Democrats are both interested in working on this right now. Third tip is to use our Capitol switchboard number. It's there on the right-hand side of the page for you, along with a little script that you can use. Feel free to use that script, by the way, or not, but it's there for you if you want to use it. Our number is toll-free. If you call the Capitol switchboard number, just ask to be connected to your member of Congress, and they'll connect you. We do ask, though, if you're going to use our number to just let us know. You can comment right here in the comment feed, like, hey, guys, I used your phone number, and here's how my call went. And we would love to hear back from you about how your calls go. One other thing that you can do to sort of make your call more effective, if you like, is personalize it a little bit to you. If you have a way that you can talk about this that relates to you or your family, that's great. Or if you can sort of localize it to your state or your district, that's also really good. Members of Congress always like to hear about things happening in their backyard or the place that they represent. Lastly, leave a message if you get an answering machine. Not everyone will always respond, but just leave a message and call back later if you can. And if it's really important for you to get a response from your member of Congress, just ask. Ask for a written response. You can give them your home address. You can give them your email address. But they're usually pretty good about getting back to you. So if you definitely want to hear your members' thoughts, make sure to make that request for a written response. And of course, say thank you and be polite. Hopefully you have great conversations with your members of Congress. So I think that actually just concludes the scripted portion of our program tonight. So I'm going to go check our comment feed and see what kind of questions we have. Thank you all so much for joining tonight. And we'll take a couple more questions here if we've got them in the feed. All right, well, here's a question that we get fairly typically. I don't know if Amit or Christine, you want to tackle this. People ask us a lot of the time, is this kind of legislation, is it going to pass in this Congress? Do you really think we can pass this kind of legislation? Is our Congress functional enough to do that? I don't know if either of you want to tackle that.
I'll go. I think it is a difficult climate to get anything passed in this Congress. That's a well-known, I guess we'll call it a fact. But it is a difficult time to get anything passed, but there is interest right now, as Kelly mentioned, in corporate accountability, particularly with GM. And I think this is a really good time to build support for legislation like this, because when we have these types of really unfortunate events of these defective products on the market that hurt and kill people, and we need these types of rules to protect the public, if the bill doesn't pass, it's just a good time to build support for it. So when we are in a really good climate, that we can get the bill passed then. So it's just a time to educate the members to try to get their support, of these solutions that we have, because I think they're pretty good solutions actually. And then when the time is right, we can get these proposals passed. Maybe not now, but maybe sometime in the future.
Yeah, I agree with everything Christine just said, and I'll add that when it comes to criminal penalties for irresponsible corporate behavior, that conversation needs to happen. And frankly, there's not enough of that conversation happening right now. So we need to start it by at least introducing some legislation that brings criminal penalties, into the public discourse. I think the public is way ahead of Congress on this, and I'm not just talking about public citizen members. I think the public across the board is frustrated that companies are seeing fines as just part of their bottom line, and they're just building it into their bottom line. They know they're going to violate, they know they're going to be irresponsible in certain ways, and they know they're going to be fined, and they're budgeting for it basically on a yearly basis. So we need to change that. We need to change that, and the only way to do that is to introduce criminal penalties into the equation.
Great, thanks guys. I'm going to check for any more questions, but I think we may be good for the evening. I think that we are. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you, Amit, and thank you, Christine, for hopping on. And we'll keep in touch about the pending legislation that will be introduced. And in the meantime, please put those calls in to your member of Congress and comment in the video feed there, below the video feed, to let us know that you did. And let us know how your calls go. We're always curious to see how our members' interactions with their member of Congress go. And thanks a lot for joining us. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
All right, thank you.
Bye.